Kumlen and Ablat Gemara. Today's daf is Samach Aleph. This is the first day of Yom Tov. We are up to daf Samach Amud Beis on the bottom of the page. Tanabon. We learned that there's Neshech and that there is Tarbis, and that Neshech is biting. Every time you lend somebody with interest, you're biting them. And also you're hurting them, and also there's tarbis, which means that you're paying an increased amount. And so basically they're both one and the same. So why does the Torah use two different expressions? To tell you you're able to avedus if you lend money with interest, usury. So now the Gemara is going to bring psukim to show that this applies to the labor, to the malva, and it doesn't matter what the loan is. As your money, you shouldn't provide for him. The neshech, this formula of biting, nor should you use the method of ribis when it comes to food. So the Gemara right away asks, ainly, all I know from here is neshech bekesef v'ribis b'eichel. Now when it comes to money, you only want over one aveda neshech if you charge more interest, and the same thing with food. If you give him a certain amount of food and he has to give it back more, that is tarbis. Each one has their own lav. Neshech ba'oichel minayin. How do you know that when you lend food and you get back more than what you lend, not only are you over marbis, you're also over neshech. Tamaloyma. It says the pasuk neshech. It says the pasuk neshech oichel ribis. Yeah, the neshech oichel. It says the pasuk that you shouldn't lend to your brother. It says neshech kesef neshech oichel. Then the pasuk includes. It means oichel also called neshech. Then the pasuk includes neshech kol davar asher yashech. Anything that you will lend. Okay, so therefore you know the neshech applies to both. Fine. So ribis bekesef nine. So okay, but ribis says clearly the pasuk food. How do I know that when you lend money and you ask for more back, you're paying interest? That's considered ribis. It says in pasuk neshech kesef. There's an extra pasuk of neshech kesef. So we say, im einu inyan leneshech kesef. Since you don't need it for neshech kesef, why should it find them? It says clearly the pasuk loy sashich. It says the pasuk clearly that you should not lend lochicha. It says you should lend to your brother. And it says neshech kesef. So what do you have to then say? Neshech kesef. Yeah. To know in your lab, because you just said so you already know you're not supposed to lend. I mean, it says neshech kesef. So if you don't need it, we have one of the ways of learning is imain in. If you don't need it for what it says, then it must be something else as close as possible. So therefore, to know in your lab is kesef. So they will come to tell you that what that it's to marbe kesef to include kesef as well. So it comes to tell you ribis kesef. That ribis is when you lend money, you're over neshech, but you're also over ribis. Ainly I know is a bar with that puzzle talking about a bar where the malva the lenders was over these two avedas. Never neshech below. It says the word neshech by a bar, or never neshech by malva. It says the word you shouldn't lend by malva as well. Just like when it comes to the labor lechalak, so you make no distinction between kesef and oichel. There's no difference whether it's money or whether it's talking about food. Is ribis, whether it's in neshech or ribis, it makes no difference whether it's food, money, neshech, ribis. We just read before, it's all included. So neshech over malva, so like he says, shabbat, the neshech over malva also like by being kesef beichel. No difference whether you're lending money or you're lending food, being beneshech, ribis. You know, over both of these. Benayin Rab is cold over. How do you know other things as well? Tamalaymer comes to tell you neshech cold over asher yishcha. It says the neshech anything that you will lend. Okay, Ravina says. So what do we have? We have Exeter Shabbat, Loiva to Malva, the word Neshech. Ravina says you don't need Exeter Shabbat. You want to know how you know Malva is also. You don't need Neshech, but you don't need a pasuk to tell you that you're over Neshech when it comes to food, or you're over ribas when it comes to money. The ksiv as kas. If the pasuk would have said, just take the pasuk literally. If the pasuk would have said, as kas beneshech, you should not lend your money beneshech. And no food should you give with ribis. Then you're right. Each one is separate, and we need to learn them out. Hash the pasuk as kas b'chol loy sitin. The pasuk is kas b'chol sitin loy beneshech. Uve marbis, the words neshech and marbis as juxtaposition of these two words. Loy sitin achol. But this is how you read it. You move the comma around like a floating comma. This is how you read it. As kaspa your money, sit to live in Nezra Marbis. Put the comma after the word Marbis, you're over to Aved, Nezra Marbis. And then read it again. Uven Nezra Marbis, put those two together, sit na chodesh and give you food. We don't need the Shabbat. What do you mean? You're arguing with the Braisa, but Tana, it says Nemar, Nemar. Comma. It says clearly, it says here the word Nesher, it says here with Nesher. There's a Gdei Shabbat. What do you tell me you don't need those Gdei Shabbat? As the Gemara, Hachikam, this is how you read it. Ilu loy nemakra, had it not been for the pasuk Yisem Gdei Shabbat, I would rely on Gdei Shabbat anyway. But after Shenemakra, now that it says the pasuk, say the Shabbat light tzirich. You don't need the Gdei Shabbat. But l'chayda, Gdei Shabbat is all halacha Moshe Messina. Therefore, what do you mean you don't need it? You're doing it. Is there such a Gdei Shabbat? Not. So obviously it is. So what do we learn from Gdei Shabbat? So the Gemara, so what do I do Gzei Shabbat? L'nesher kol davar ashisha. That we need it for the other part of the pasuk. Kol davar, that everything's included. L'kasab b'malva. That doesn't say by a lender, and that is what the Gzei Shabbat will tell you. That a lender also, no matter what he lends, if he takes back more than what he lent, and that's how they rearrange the loan, then that is considered what do you call nesher chidibus. Amar Rabba. Why do you need to say specifically a lav? You're not allowed to lend money with interest, lav begezel, or there's a lav in the Torah, you're not allowed to steal, and lav by no, you're not allowed to deceive, you're not allowed to overcharge. The principle is always the same. You're not allowed to take money that doesn't belong to you, and when you're harming another person, each one has a novelty over the other ones. And you wouldn't learn one from the other. If you only knew by dibus, I would say, you know why? Chidushu doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. The bar was prepared to pay the extra money, and it makes sense. The lender, meanwhile, for those 3-4 months that he parks the money with the bar, he can't use it to earn money on this money. So therefore, he's entitled to make it to pay interest. So the whole idea of ribas is a chiddush. And furthermore, it says that even the borrower can't. The borrower is not lending; he's paying more extra. Why should he be even? Therefore, it's a chiddush. You can't compare anything to it. You wouldn't learn gzeila from there or I know. Okay, because I'm not allowed to steal. I would say about korche. You went in and you stole without the other person's agreement. I know when you sell something to somebody else, he's prepared to pay for it. So what's the aveda? Aim aloi, no. No, so just say lav no, where you're hurting somebody, overcharging. Sure, you're not allowed to steal. No. He didn't know that he's being cheated, so therefore he wasn't meichel. But when something is stolen, he knows that it was stolen, then he's meyai, sure he's meichel. He did not know at all in order to be meichel. But saying you'd rather know that it was stolen, and you give up. You abandon hope of getting it back. The Gemara. Okay, I can learn one from one. No, but there's one from two. So let's go through each one and see. Each one is prove is so different from the other two that you cannot learn from the other two either. So the high say, which one should you bring? But you should not say lav by dibus. Don't mention lav by dibus. But say mahanach. Learn out from gzela and from ino. You know what I would say? Malahanish against lemidas. Both of them, they wasn't really aware. You know, by Gzela, he wasn't in an agreement. By no, he wasn't. What do you call? He wasn't aware that he's being cheated. Taima beribis, on the other hand, by ribis the medaite, he willingly is ready to accept the pay an extra 10%. So what's the problem? So you need to tell me that it's awesome. So don't mention it. No, but taste him hana. Learn up between ribis and Gzela. No, I would say no malahanach. These two shikain ain't derech mekach hamemcha. It's not the normal way of buying and selling. I know is you're buying and selling something, and you just let's say overcharge, and the people are willing to pay the overcharge. They're desperate for this particular item; they're willing to pay. So that's different. So maybe it's not an avera. There are some people willing to pay, so maybe it's not avera to everybody else. Don't mention at all stealing. But taste man, look for another two. I would say, don't say stealing. I'm looking for another two because mal. What are you gonna ask? You can tell me mal ribas. She can't chiddush. I'll say, look at no chiddush there. I know to chiyach. You know that kind of deception. You know makes sense. You deceiving somebody and hurting them. Malo, you know she can't like I didn't know about it, but the ribas he's willing to accept. Sorry, but gzela he knows about it. Ribas to chiyach. Ribas he knows about it doesn't help. Chazadin, we go back and forth. Each one has a different chumrah. What do we have in common between ribas and enosh? You can't go easily. You're hurting somebody, taking something that doesn't belong to you. So af and the ovi, so too, I will bring gezel. I'll say the same thing regarding stealing. So look at one year policy for example. How many more answers? Hachinam, your husband right. A lab against women, no one you got against the lab in the Torah written for stealing is actually talking about holding back of an employee's wages. As the Gemara, I need to learn from the pasuk. Sizzles and face a pasuk. Holding back somebody's payment is written clearly. Like you shouldn't hold back the payment of a poor person. It's an aveda. So the sashik sachir on Evian. When answers lav at Allah b'shnei lav, tell you that you are over two lavin if you hold back somebody's wages. So the obvious question is, if you already tell me it's two lavin, why don't you just say it's talking about gzela? And to tell you, you could have learned from Ino, and you could have learned from this. So that's one lav, and we have a second lav. That's why I tell you right. Why jump to holding back wages? So the Rishonim explain that when do we say that we give you two lavin to get punished twice? You get malchus twice, so it's relevant. But by gzela, since you don't get malchus by gzela, it's a lav hanitik, let's say, and it's a returning gzela. If there's no malchus, what's the point of having two lavin versus one lavin? It makes absolutely no difference. Says the Gemara. Okay. Look with ribas and okay. How do you know the second lav has to do with holding back wages? Maybe it has to do with ribas and enough. The lav and get two averes there. What it says, Dover halamed me'inyana. You look at the general context of that pasuk, and what's the pasuk talking about? Ubinyana, the sochir. It's written in the context of a sochir of a person that you hired, and therefore that lav of gezel is written. Says le sashek v'le sigzel. Don't hold back wages and don't steal. So therefore, we say that the lav le sigzel is referring to le sashek. Says the Gemara, okay, that's stealing gzela, outright gzela. What about robbery, thievery? The Torah writes lamali, same thing. We can learn from my no. Says the Gemara, and ribis. Says the Gemara, so place. Look at it, lamali. You know what you need to look at the time. You'll be learned. We shouldn't steal. Amanas make it. If I want to just taunt you and tease you, I'm stealing. I have no intention of stealing. I'm going to put it back. I would have thought it's permitted. And for that, you need a pasuk, even though your intention was to give it back. And also, amanas l'shalom. I want to give this guy a present. I'm actually a nice guy, but I know he'll refuse. So I steal it. The bezin will pass have to pay him back double, and he'll take it. So this is a ruse of how to give him a present. I would have thought that's permitted. Comes to tell you that's also not permitted. The Torah says, do not falsify the weights. Why did you have to say that? We know already the principle that you're not allowed to cheat. We're talking about somebody who puts in salt into his weights. And by doing that, he weighs down the scale a bit, so it shows. So when he buys, it's a pound, but really when it shows a pound, it's really what do you call it? He adds certain things into the scale to make it heavier, and therefore he cheats, and that's what we're talking about up here. So I'm going to ask a question: what's the difference? But isn't that outright stealing? You're cheating. You're changing the weights. Tell you the chiddush here is you don't have to wait till you actually use those weights and you cheat someone. We're talking about even the moment you put the salt into the scales, then you're already a cheater. Tell them what we learned. Don't do the wrong thing in when it comes to mishpah, for example. Mida, when it comes to measure things, mishka weight, when you come to measure liquids, don't cheat. The mida, what's mida? Zoom is correct. You come to measure property. What do you mean don't cheat? Let's say two brothers want to divide an estate. So you don't measure one with a rope in the summer, and one in the winter. Using the same rope, because when the rope is wet, it stretches out further. So if you can use the same rope, you're going to give more to one brother than to the other brother, because in the summer it shrivels up. So that's cheating. The mishka wouldn't be a wage. Don't place holding your weight. But what it means is you shouldn't cause bubbles, froth. And therefore, when you do that, you're not going to give them the full contents of the liquid that they bought, because they're getting some froth as well. So it's a and that is the froth is a very small amount. If you pour this very quickly, it makes a froth. And then you give me say, oh, here's a pitcher worth. A few minutes later, it'll subside. There won't be any more pitchers worth. So Madam will say, which is only a 30th. But like there's a don't cheat. Surely it applies to hin, to all these other measurements. To hin and the chatzi hin, and shlisha hin, or the viyasa hin, the leg, the chatzi leg, viyasa leg. So all those, so we know already you're not allowed to cheat all of those. Amar Rav, from that kabel chayma. If you're not allowed to cheat over here, a big, very tiny amount. Surely you're not allowed to cheat small amounts, a bigger amount. Amar Rav says Rav, now we're going to ask why Yitzhi. Sometimes the Torah says don't do this because we see Mitzrayim. Why remind us Yitzhi Mitzrayim? What in the world is a link between the two? I am the one. I'm the one who had to determine in Mitzrayim to know whether somebody's a firstborn, especially by Mitzrayim. They have these women who have many affairs with very different men. So I had to know which child was actually her firstborn and which one wasn't, or which child was the firstborn to this man and which child was the firstborn to that man. Ani, so saying, Ani, I am going to punish if somebody lends money, using usury, interest, and he says, "That's my money. It belongs to a guy." I know that it's actually his own money, and he just made up a story that belongs to a guy, and therefore he's lending with interest. And I know that. And the truth of the matter is, even if he's telling the truth, that the money belongs to a guy, he's not allowed to be the one facilitator to be the one lending. What Taste wants to learn is talking about that you said, let's say, your friend tells you, lend me money from that guy. And then you give him that money and you say, yeah, this came from that guy. In truth, it's your own money. So that's what we're talking about over here. And they just said, I'm going to come down on you like a ton of bricks. Well, my voice is so, but you lend to eat Misha time in Shloisa, Bemelach, Umemi, Shatoile, Kola Ilabig, that somebody puts the salt in the way to weigh it down, or somebody who says that Chelis, because you have a sap on a tree, Kola Ilam, that looks very similar color. It's indigo. It's a very similar color to Chelis. And he told people this is Chelis when it isn't. I know the truth. And they said, just like Mitzrayim, I know every detail here too. And so the person who's claimed that it's chelis, I know that it isn't. And Rashi says here, interestingly, that the chelis comes from this fish chalazim. So Rashi clearly holds it, as you know, there's a big argument where chelis comes from. He says that dam chalazim, it's in the sea, and it only surfaces once every 70 years. You know, Rambam knows it's a worm, others think it's some kind of a mussel, or and that's how we know that Ratzin had his opinion what it was, and then other Rabbanim, Chief Rabbi of Israel, he came out and said, no, that's wrong, and something else. And big controversy. Ravina equal the sort of Potter. Ravina once came to Suda, that's near the river of Potter. Other Chanim, so the Potter Ravina, so the Chanina of Suda said to Ravina, Yitzi is Mitzrayim, because I'm on a Gabi Shratz. Only why the Torah have to highlight that took out Mitzrayim when he says that when he forbids us to eat from Shratzim. He says that, don't eat Kani Hashem Amayla Eskem as I took out Mitzrayim. I'm a good Baruch Hu. So he said the same thing. I distinguish between the firstborn which man. And I also part of me I'm going to come after somebody who mixes kibbeh dog in the innards of fish. It's made they're not kosher, but kibbeh dog in with the innards of fish are kosher. It's hard to tell. And the Moichi saw, then you sell to Eden. On Malay, he said to him, that was my question. And no hamala koshli. Here we have a description which you don't find anywhere else. It was hamala. I took you out and up. What's it then? Why the word hamala? Why he says hamala? Amalek and Torah Bishmol. Hashem says, if I would have taken the Mitzrayim only for this thing alone, that they should not go ahead and defile themselves by eating all of these rodents and so on. Daya, it would have been sufficient for that. Hamayla would have lifted you to my nation just for that alone. It was good enough. Amalek said to me, "Not fish a garai. It's fame ribis and tzitzis mishkalos." We just said about ribis, by tzitzis, by mishkalos, by weights. We have Hashem's name there. it says there also, it says they took out Mitzrayim, and they don't say Amayla, as if to say that Shrotzim is a worse Havay than all the other ones. Why? Amalei said to me, right, even though that the Havay isn't any worse, it's very mias, well, right, it's very mias to eat. Okay, Beis Tarbis. In what it says in the Mishnah says, what's Tarbis? Gives you an example of what Neshech is and what Tarbis is. And by Neshech, it talks about money. You lend $100, 120 straight out. What's Tarbis? Amar bepedes. Case, for example, Lokach heimenu chitim bedin rizav. Whole elaborate case. As we'll come back to later. You bought wheat for a dinner azov, and then when it came time to pay, the guy, the price of wheat went up, and he said, "Look, I don't have the wheat to give you, but I have the money." And the guy said, "I want to buy wine." So the guy said, "I don't have let's consider it $30, but I owe you $30. I don't have right now the money, but I'll give you $30 worth of wine." And if there is no wine available, so then, and we'll talk more about it in the next daf, if there's no wine available, then it's like this. But it's only midrabanan because it's not a straight out interest loan. This is through a way of selling, so it's midrabanan. What do you mean, Kate said this? Why is such a strange case? And lending money for an extra amount of payback. That's not considered ibis. Says the Gemara, Atkan, or the difference is as follows. Atkan shall trade till now was straight out mehat that's alone. The kava elich shall dividend. From now on, we're talking about midrabanan because this is through a method of selling. Till now was trader, and from now on, midrabanan. Atkan till now, Yochin Russia the Yilbert Sadi, the Russia prepares it, and the Sadi will wear it. That means till now that if the guy, the person who lent the interest died, and he leaves for his children the interest money that he made, they're not mechuyev to give it back. Atkan till here, Yochin Russia, the Russia prepares the money illegally, but the Yilbert Sadi, the Sadi goes, "What Atkan was Suloi? What do you mean?" And when it was the Rabbani, now I keep the money, or you have to make sense. Ha'tayra, you took interest, which is forbidden. You can keep it, you don't have to give it back. And with the Rabbanim, and there's machlekes in the poskim where there's a midas chassidus to give it back. In fact, we learned in Bava Metzia that Meir Tzakana that the Taka shouldn't take it if he gives it back because we want people to do tshuva. Otherwise, they never do tshuva. I feel adkan yochid. Not that means to even here, even with Ha'tayra, we say that you don't have to give it back. Adkan ribas ksutza. Until here, it's ribas that's a fixed amount, and it was planned beforehand. The kavet rebak ribas. From now on, it's only the dust of ribas, only us and midrabban. So actually, now we're going to have a machlekes about ribas. If you collect ribas, do you have to give it back? That if you took a fixed ribis, the dayanim will intercede or intervene and take the money away from you, give it back to the borrower. Avak ribis, but it's only ribis. The dayanim will not mix it. I feel ribis tsunami ain't a says even ribis even fixed, the dayanim will not come in and take it back. What's this for Rabbi Yechanan? It's illegal to take the interest. Why should we take it back? On my cross and the pasuk, b'neshech nosan says the pasuk. They gave it with neshech. Says in Tanakh, a neshech nosan. They gave it with neshech. The tarbis lokach and the ribas they took. The chai lo yichya and he won't live as called to Eila asa. Now why that all those who do all of these abominations won't live. So we dash in lemisa. So what's the punishment for usury? Misa v'loy l'shavan, and you cannot undo it. You cannot give it back. It says at the end of the pasuk, "Mois, you must double by year. The money is on the blood is on his hand." But another reason says the pasuk, "Al tikach mi'itu." Do not take mim neshech betarbis v'yareisem lekach yishafir Hashem. Lemoyden yikol Hashem. The only thing you can do is you can fear Hashem, but you don't have to give the money back. Rabba said, "Megufli krosh milei." For the very pasuk, it says the pasuk. This very pasuk it says the end of that pasuk he brought before. Mois yumas dama bayir. He shall die, and dama bayir, his blood is on his hands. Huksha malve ribas the shem kedame. We equate malve, the people who lend ribas to those who commit murder. It says dama bayir, dama by the blood, spilled blood. That's like a murder. So we're comparing somebody who lends on interest to a murderer. And why? Because since you're impoverishing somebody else, you're lending with interest. So that person now is going to become poorer and poorer because he has to pay back more than what you gave him. And eventually he'll die from hunger as if you murdered him. Just like you kill somebody, there's no way you can undo that. It's so too when it comes to ribis, there's no way you can do tshuva. I'm not using my time to bless it. What's this word? So that's Rabbi Yechon. What's Rabbi Lazar's word? Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Lazar says, and he was a Talmud of Rabbi Yechon. Rabbi Lazar says that that the Bezin will intervene and take the money back. My time of blood. I'm across in the pasuk. The first part of the pasuk talks about ribas. It says, "Do not take any ribas from the person. You should fear Hashem. Your brother should live with you. How does your brother live with you? At the end of the day, you took his money away. Hadalei means you returned the money. In order that your brother should be able to what the neichei be able to live. What does he do with the fact he should live with your brother? He used it for the famous brisa. Look at the Tanya. Two people going on the road. One of them has a jug of water. If they both will drink it, there's no question that both will die and not survive. Although one of them drinks it, one of them drinks it, he will arrive to a civilized area. So what should you do? Should you? But if you keep it for yourself, it's yours. If you share it, you'll die. It's better that you both drink the yamusu, and you will die. And you will not have to witness the death of your friend and outlive him, and you come back feeling guilty. So therefore, he said that both that. So he said that no, they have to have Avad Yisrael, and both of you should share together. You come first. No, you should drink it, and you come first. Only, as the Mepharshim say, only Rabbi Akiva could have said that. Anybody else would have said that. We would suspect that you're only thinking about your own personal selfish reasons. However, Rabbi Akiva, who championed the idea of V'haftu l'reacha kamecha, and he comes along and says, even though I'm the one who says that, but when it comes to this situation, I say your life comes first. Then we know that this is from halach. So, Meisha, I'll ask you a question. We'll ask you a question as follows. You, Rabbi Yechon, said what? That Bezin will not take the money away. So tell me, how shot. It says the father left behind a Yerusha, money of interest. Even though they know that it's interest, they don't have to give it back. They don't have to give it back because they're not chayiv to give back. The money is theirs. They're not chayiv to pay the debts of their father. However, avian sounds like only the children are potter. So we deduce. What about the parents? Chayiv, the father say chayiv has to return it. Clear, like Rabbi Lozer, not like Rabbi Yechon. Says Rabbi Yechon, but really, the Abu Nami the father also have to go back. The idea let me just say, because the next case is the Niachlan being part of the father behind something which is noticeable that it belongs to the father. So it'll be a constant embarrassment, a source of shame. Let's say you left behind a bull, or you left behind a talis, you left behind a mantle, for example, or for example, you left behind I live behind a cow, a talis, or anything which is significant that people recognize. They have to return them, they covered Aviyim. So this only applies to the children. So that's why we're talking about the children. No raya. But really the father also doesn't have to give it back. We're talking about the children. Covered Aviyim. Someone asks a question. You're telling me that the chayiv to return it because of the cover of the father. The father's a charosha. If the father's a rasha, they don't have to give covet anymore. Or can we call it over here nasi that a nasi amongst the people? It says the positive shouldn't curse. It says only if he behaves like a yid. If he doesn't behave like a yid, you're not chayiv to give him covet. So since the father stole it, why do they have to give it back? They're worried about the covet of the father. The father's a chagalat. The case of the he did tshuva. He did tshuva. And that's why they have to give cover to the father. Ask the Gemara, he has a tshuva, the Maiberger, if he did tshuva, then how come the cow was still there? So he speak lahachas. If you're right before he died, he didn't have a chance to give it back, return it. Basically, another question. We'll just finish this opinion. Rabbi Yochanan Abelazar basically asks a question. It says Hagazloni, the Gazloni, Mal Beiribis, the Gazloni, Mal Beiribis, and those who lend Ribis, Abavishagogu, even though they collected Machzirin, they have to give it back. Right? Um, the line. That now you have to understand. Even though they collected that, what are we talking about? Gazloni by Gazan. My afa pishigobu, even though they collected what do you mean even though they collected? He guzzle if he stole it when he collected. If he stole it, of course he has to give it back. It's not his guzzle. And he leg up, it didn't steal it, what do he has to give it back? Gazloni can why call him a Gazan? Anyway, what are we talking about? We're talking about interest. Gazloni, my name Malvaribus. We're talking about Malvaribus. And it's saying over here that even though they collected, they have to give it back. Even though they took the interest, they have to give it back. Exactly like Abelazar. Answer you're right. However, Tanoi, we can throw it to Machlekes Tanoim and find another brayse. We have a Tanakama, and we have Nechemia and Abelazar and Ben Yaakov. Now we don't know what the Tanakama says, but we'll assume whatever Nechemia and Ben Yaakov says, he says the opposite. The time of the Brayse and the Chemye, but Ben Yaakov pointing at some malva, they say that the malva, the lender is exempt. The Esa out of the guarantor, I mean, they should yesh behev kuma say. He says, this is what the Brayse says, a bit cryptic, but basically the Brayse says is that the malva and the Orev is the guarantor. Both of them are potter. They don't get malchus. Why don't they get malchus? Because they have a mitzvah say of returning it. So it's a lav hanitig la say. My kum asay. What exactly is the kum asay? We're talking about a lender, we're talking about interest. Lav mishum damile kumu ahadru. I mean, what we say, you have to give it back. So these two tanaim and the Chemros and the Yaakov hold that interest you have to give back. So every time you borrow, you lend with interest. It's a lav hanitik lasay that it can be amended, it can be rectified with an asay. But the Tanakh argues, so the Tanakh hold it's not a lav hanitik lasay. Why not? Because there's no mitzvah to give it back, like Rabbi Yochanan. So we see this is the machlekes Rabbi Yochanan and Abelazar. You call Tanakh, so a lav b'nei you have to give it back. No. Really, everybody holds. Well, Machlek is Rashi and some of the Shem and Jason and many other Shem. Rashi holds. Everyone agrees to Rabbi Loza. That is that you always have to give it back. The Bezin will intervene. So what's Rabbi Mechemia and Rabbi Loza and Yaakov saying? Sorry, what's the Tanakama saying that you don't have to give it back? If you always have to give it back, why here you don't? We'll see in a minute. And Jason that everyone holds Rabbi Yochanan. And you always have to give it back. And why doesn't the Yaakov say you don't have to? So more explains. But as you know, we're not talking about that you already collected money. You did not collect the money. I didn't collect the money. If you didn't collect the money, you said, what do we give it back? My kuma say, we say you have a mitzvah say. So fix it up. You didn't lend the money yet. He's what? To rip up the star. You wrote a star contract, you yet lend the money. Rip it up. Mike, I understand. We had to say, that a star that was written is as if you already collected it because you walked into any bezin and bezin will force that other person to give you whatever it says in the star, followed by the star, as if you collected already of the society. So then the moment you wrote the star, as if you collected the interest rate, you already over yisur. You tell me that everyone holds that Bezdin can intervene and take the money back. Well, the moment you wrote a star, you're already awesome. It's really awesome. According to Tanakama as well. Why did Tanakama say that why the Tanakama says, why does Mechain of Lesman Yaakov say that you are potter, it's too late, you're already over Yaveda. It's over. And the so the chayda, if you ripped your star, then according to everybody, you as if you gave it back. If you didn't collect yet, if you didn't physically collect yet, and you ripped up the stars, as if you gave the money back. So according to everybody, you should be allowed to say. The lafki government, if you can tell me that it's not like he's collected, so Bezin won't intervene here because remember everyone was like a that you have to give it back, but he never took it first place. And if the star is not considered collected, so make Tanakana make sense. It's not a lava nitig. Let's say what I say. You didn't have it yet. So how come the other ones hold that yes, you have to rip up the star? Why did you rip the star? Nothing happened yet. Nothing happened. Says the Gemara, you didn't collect. So why do they say rip it up? Well, Kamashlan, the Summa Milsi, they say the moment you wrote the shtar, even before the payment, the moment you wrote the shtar, you raised an Aveda. That's what they hold. Rakamo is not an Aveda until you actually pay the money, the interest. But Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov holds the moment you wrote the shtar, you already committed Aveda of lending with usury. And therefore, you have to rip up the shtar. And Hachadam Established makes sense. Now we learned the Elu Oivim Belaysa said the following Oivim Aveda, Hamal Halayla, Ha'arim, the guarantor, the Ha'edim, and the witnesses. Now, what do the witnesses do? I mean, the Oivim is in the mission, but that's about it. Is be Shalem Kul Ava Maisa, they all did a Maisa all involved in the Shtad. Ha'edim Avid. What in the world did the Ain do? Allah Shmamina, the Summa, they signed the contract, and that is the Aveda. The Summa Milsi, because if the Aveda is a payment, they were not involved in that. So therefore, it's the contract itself. Shmamina approves. So we have a Machlekes, Rabbi Loza, and Rabbi Yechon. Rabbi Loza says that the Bezin will come and take the interest away if it's the interest Mahatera, and Rabbi Loza and Rabbi Yechon says no, the Chacham will not take away, even though you did commit a terrible Aveda, the Chacham will not take it back from you. Okay, we'll stop here. Have a good jump.